welcome to this September webinar. And today's topic is around leadership across cultures. So is leadership across cultures just leadership, or is there something more to it if you work internationally? And how can you become that better and more effective international leader? That's what we're going to focus on today. What that means exactly is that you learn why many leaders struggle with their effectiveness after moving abroad. I'll give you an example of what that struggle could look like and how that's really not specific and really not to do with the logistics of the move at all. What are the crucial skills for leaders who work internationally to develop when they work across cultures and with people from around the world? And that those skills that I want to share with you and discuss with you today are not your usual leadership skills. I consider there to be some sort of baseline, but what are those skills that really make or break the international leader? So we're going to discuss those in a bit more detail. And then finally, also how you can start building your cultural competence today already with the sort of base that you have got at this point in time. So hopefully that's cool for you, and we can kick off. But before, if you haven't met me yet, or if we haven't had the chance to talk much before, my name is Marta. I'm the creator of Project Abroad, the blog, the Instagram account, and my coaching practice. I'm a psychologist by education, HR professional and coach by experience, and an expat by choice. I am originally from Poland and I live in the UK in London at the moment for the past 7 years. And I am literally that expat by choice. I have chosen and wanted to move abroad after I graduated from university. And since then, that whole time abroad, living abroad has been spent in the UK in my case. Privately, a little bit, I like to do stuff for my mind and for my body to, sort of practice what I preach in terms of developing yourself and managing yourself and your energy. So one of the tasks that I've sort of retaken up during the pandemic was color pencil drawing. So you can see some examples of my little scribblings. And it really helps me clear the mind. It's such a good mindful exercise to do. And I don't think about anything else when I'm just like scribbling down. So that's something that I do for my mind. I am also an avid learner. So my recent learning commitment is to learning Spanish. And I've signed up for conversation lessons in Spanish. And I have to say, it's been a while since I've been properly learning a language. I only speak Polish and English at this point fluently. So this really challenges my brain and brain cells to think about every single thing I want to say. And it is at times quite frustrating when you can't say and formulate a sentence in a way that you would like to. So I find that a really good experience for myself to have again, and to remind myself what it's like, especially that I work with people who move to different places in the world, also those who where they don't speak the local language, so they do really get this struggle as well. And then finally, for the body, so mind is taken care of, body is taken care of as well. I do pole dancing and pole fitness, you could say, and that really gives me a lot of joy. And I do that for a while now, since I've moved here actually to London, and in this expat sort of adaptation context, it's been really helpful for me to find a hobby and find an activity where I can meet people and connect in that new country, so that I can build relationships and sort of feel like I belong a little bit more. And pole fitness has been, or has had, that function for me after moving abroad. So something for the mind and for the body, and a little bit about my expat story. Moving on to our topic of today's webinar. In my HR experience, I've been doing various roles, and I've been working with international teams in different contexts. So I started working in Poland, so I was in my own country, but working internationally with other offices across the world. Then I moved abroad to London, so I was an expat myself, but then also working internationally as well as with my British team, or British-based team, but also sort of culturally diverse. And then I was doing recruiting and I was doing global mobility. So I also transferred over 700 people in and out of London during my time in the role. And it really opened my eyes as to how things can be approached really differently. And to the struggles and challenges that managers have when they themselves move abroad for an assignment, for a project, or for managers who have expats on their teams. So this is to talk about and bring all of that experience together, and some of the tips and reflections that I have on the topic. So for yourself, I want you to answer for yourself right now. So if you were to ask to move abroad temporarily to support a project team in a country that you haven't been in before, how would you prepare for that move? What sort of the first things that come to your mind? You could probably think about logistics, right? So check the visas, sort of find the apartment. Maybe your company will support you with that as well. You know, you could get excited about the move, see what kinds of things you could see in this new place while you're there, and do some sightseeing, etc. You know, you could be also really sort of humbled, right, that you have been selected to support that particular team abroad, and you were likely chosen because you were the best at what you were doing, or best candidate for the role, and you have expertise in what that team is doing there. So you'd also want to probably connect with that new team before you move beforehand, get to know them, what are the challenges, how do they like to work, etc. So that's all great. There may be some other things that come to your mind. I do feel that as an international leader and working across cultures, crossing cultures, actually yourself to move abroad and work with a different team, you may want to go one step lower and one step below that. So what would that mean to get to know your team? How would that look like to connect with them? And also when you go there, like how would you go about building that team and building the relationships? So I'm going to give you an example of things that can go wrong during such moves. So it's a story of an American manager, American leader, who, you know, at home was just approaching the team quite directly, you know, having the brainstorm meetings, one-on-ones with them as well. Feedback was given quite indirectly, I would say. You know, he was getting the team excited, involving the team in the decisions that they were making, also getting them to take action sooner rather than later, instead of, you know, for example, or as opposed to, let's say, assessing the risks maybe beforehand, or considering lots of different scenarios or involving a lot of people in the decision making on the higher level as well. So so that was kind of how he was working, and he was asked to go to Poland to work with the team there, and he didn't adjust his strategies. All right, so he was trying to do the same thing. He did hear that Polish people maybe complained a little bit more, maybe are a bit more distant in general in their communication, maybe a bit more direct, but generally, like, you know, he felt that he felt confident, okay, in his abilities and his leadership skills. He's been a manager for a long time, and he thought that he would bring the energy and enthusiasm into that Polish team as well. But he hit a wall. So when he came to Poland and started working with the team, they felt like they're quite distant from the team there, and he noticed that the team doesn't engage with him as much, is not as excited as what he was sort of used to from his American teams. You know, maybe they didn't show that as much proactivity as he would have liked, and expected him to lead the team a bit more. So his conclusion was that the team is just not competent enough to do this project, perhaps, that they need so much guidance, and that they're not as sort of communicative in the way that he would like them to be. And he suggested maybe they do some trainings, on the communication skills and the expertise that they needed to do the project. Now, the team's opinion, though, of that manager, and what we've been hearing was, oh, he's just so American, whatever that means, right? He's just so American. He tries to be our friend. He wants to be our friend, but we need him to be the boss. Like he's not taking it seriously. He's not a serious boss. So there's this expectation that the manager is sort of a manager because they know better. So they felt like they couldn't trust him, because he wasn't able to make decisions by himself, and he was involving them in everything and in all the processes. So on his side, he thought he's building trust with the team, involving them in the projects, but on their team, on the team's side, they were like, well, he's not really managing us, like we're telling him what to do, so why is he even a manager, right? So there's this distrust between the two groups. So the moral of the story, if you will, is that some adjustments are needed, and most likely will be needed when you work across cultures. And just doing things as you've done them back home is not necessarily always effective, and doesn't have the best results. And you'll see those not best results very quickly if you don't take cultural factors into consideration. Of course, not everything is cultural, and we need to say that openly, and there's individual differences and preferences, etc. But it's important, in my opinion, to consider them and prepare your self-awareness, your knowledge around that as well, apart from the logistics of the move. So now that we're moving on to the skills, let's talk about that. So as I said, the sort of classic leadership skills still apply, right? So the problem solving, the analytical skills, or the team building, etc. Like the basis of that are still there. What's worth having in mind is that most of the leadership training that at least I know from European, American, Latin American markets is really based on American research, Western research. So it's just good to have in mind that all the theories that we're learning were created where we are, and not necessarily, let's say, in Southeast Asia, right, where things might work slightly differently. So just bearing that in mind. Okay, but what apart from those baseline skills, right? What else do we need? So I think that the absolute base is the self-awareness, but deep self-awareness. So obviously, as a leader, I would imagine you would learn different skills. You would learn about your values, your leadership styles, things like that. I think when you lead across cultures and lead international teams or have expats on your team, you need to go one step deeper. So what will be helpful here is if you get that awareness around your values. So what is the core of what you believe in, like really deeply, that if it's challenged, it really triggers you. Your attitudes, things like your biases, your cultural influences as well. Preferred leadership styles, and your personal sort of attributes and characteristics, right? So this type of deep self-awareness is needed to help you understand those deep-seated beliefs of yourself and of others, and then in turn build better relationships with your team, right? So I think that's just the basis of for any leader who's working internationally. That links to managing relationships and trust with other people. So in terms of trust and cultural, that sort of cross-check here is we talk about very often about cultural dimensions, right? And that's something that I preach, and I'll talk about it slightly later in this presentation as well. One of them is how the trust is built. So imagine a dimension, like a straight line that goes from one point to another, and it's a continuum. So you can be anywhere on that scale. It's not like either or, it's sort of you're somewhere in between that scale usually, right, in terms of your preference. So there's a task-oriented approach on one side, and we have relationships-oriented on the other side. Now, if you come from a more task-oriented culture and way of working, like for example the US or the UK for that matter, where I'm based, you may be used to very different way of working and building those relationships, and you might actually perceive some of the things that relationship-based or more relationship-based cultures do as a waste of time. So for example, I've had again a US manager moving to France, and they were absolutely frustrated with the length of lunches that the French colleagues were taking and the amount of like long coffee breaks and things. So for him, it was, lunch was just, okay, fuel, and then we'll go back to work. We boom, boom, we do the task, we do what we need to do, and then we move on. Like for what he found in France with his French team was that actually they spend a lot of time building these relationships through, for example, lunches, etc. They still do the work. It's not like they don't work at all. It was just perceived like that. But he didn't appreciate the depth of the relationship that and trust that can be built through those informal connectivity, let's say events or connectivity opportunities, right? So a lunch in France very often is not a waste of time. Actually, a lot of business is being done and decisions and discussions are actually happening there. So it just sometimes seems like it's just a lunch and chill, but it may not necessarily be that. And for those people who attend and who participate in that relationship building, it's then much easier to work with them on a daily basis. So you need to appreciate these kinds of differences in terms of building that trust. Another example I can give you is let's say, the hierarchy and the more collaborative versus more hierarchical working style. So for example, in Denmark, I work in a Danish company right now, so I've had this experience of a little bit of adjustment to a more collaborative way of working. By collaborative, I mean that the decision making process is more of a group decision, and then the manager just like reconfirms the group consensus, but it's more based on the group consensus than anything else than just like manager telling you what to do. So if you're a manager, let's say in Denmark, and remember, we're talking cultural trends, so there may be different companies, there may be different individuals that prefer to work different ways, but the cultural research over the years has shown us that, yes, there's individual differences and all the layers and how we were brought up and our personal preferences, etc. But there's also a cultural layer which shows trends across the population of a country, right? So of course there are differences between regions or the cities or people, but we're talking cultural trends on a societal level, right? So in Denmark, you could expect the manager, the leader, to be sort of a bit more inclusive perhaps of other people's opinions and really asking you, pulling the opinion out of you, like really actively asking you for what you think. How do you think we should do this, or what approach do we need to take in this project, etc. So gathering a little bit more, and then it's very likely that a lot of people, leadership but also other team members, are going to be involved in the decision-making process. Now, if I think about Poland, for example, it's much more hierarchical in the sense that, also in the sense of decision-making, it sort of changes and evolves, of course, depending on which company you work for, because organizational cultures also play a role. But generally, if you're a manager, you should show authority as well, right? And part of that authority is actually the ability to make decisions, sometimes with incomplete information, of course, and there's a fine balance between involving your team and making them engaged into the project and what you're doing, and you being perceived like you don't know what you're doing because you have to ask for opinions all the time. So then why you're a manager if I know better? You know what I mean? So it's that perception and those fine balances between how people work and what is perceived sort of professional or collaborative or trustworthy, etc. That's another area that international global leaders, I feel, need to develop and explore to be able to navigate these and balance these effectively. All right. Moving on, cultural knowledge. So you remember the dimensions I mentioned before, right? That's something that I really like to work with. There's also an assessment that you can take on cultural values, which will show you where you are on each of those dimensions. So in the assessment that I use by Cultural Intelligence Center, there's 10 of these dimensions, and you get to assess yourself on each of those to see how, like, what your preference sort of is, where it sits, and also compare it to the different cultures or cultural clusters that we have, so that you can identify where there's similarities and when there's any gaps that you might potentially need to close, and the similarities that you can build on as well, and what impact do they have on your relationships with people. And I think that cultural knowledge, especially for people who cross cultures and jump through between different cultural contexts frequently, or work in international teams, right? This language is important to have. So what the cultural knowledge and the cultural values dimensions knowledge gives you is it gives you language to talk about the challenges and the emotions maybe that you're experiencing, or frustrations that you're experiencing with the different ways of working. And so what that gives you is the ability to name that frustration. And that's really valuable, because then you're no longer at the level of, oh, why don't they just make the decision already? Why don't they just, write to me directly, and they need to use all these filler words, right? And it helps you get out of that frustration and actually move into, okay, I see what's going on. Could that be cultural? Yeah, maybe. There's this dimension that talks about that, indirect and direct communication. So let's see if there's potentially a gap that I can notice, and then I can decide what to do about it. So the knowledge itself is not enough. You need to take action and strategize as well as to how you want to deal with a potential challenge. But it's a basis, and it's a very useful tool, in fact, to have for your own self-awareness. It all comes back to self-awareness, but also to be able to discuss these potential challenges together and find a way forward that works for everyone else. So that's that, cultural knowledge. And then we have drive, curiosity, motivation. So CQ drive, CQ stands for cultural intelligence. So it's kind of, we have emotional intelligence, and there's cultural intelligence as well. And drive is one of the 4 capabilities that cultural intelligence consists of. And drive is all about that curiosity, that motivation, for you to experience the different situations, the different contexts, the different languages and cultures, and learn about people and learn about countries. So you need to stick your head into that box and really, really explore, right? So you have that motivation to do that. Now, that motivation can be internal or external. Internal would be like that genuine curiosity, and that comes from within you, that you just really deeply enjoy these conversations, etc. You've got that internal commitment to learning, etc. But it can be also external, and it's equally valid, right, and equally valuable, where maybe you don't have that drive necessarily to go and explore different cultures or reach out to people who are different from yourself, but you are in a leadership role, and you are working with people from different regions of the world, or maybe you're leading an international team, or maybe you're moving abroad yourself. And so that sort of triggered your motivation, external motivation, right? To learn about cultures a little bit more, and to commit to that learning and flexibility in building those skills that are necessary for a global leader. So that curiosity, that motivation, and stating that quite clearly is going to be helpful in developing those skills, because again, capabilities and skills is something that can be developed, but it's something that takes time. Okay, so that commitment and that drive is then becoming really really important when you want to work on developing these skills. All right, we've got one more, and that's adaptability and flexibility. So the thing I often hear when I talk about, adjusting and working across cultures and developing that cultural competence and awareness is, okay, but I don't want to, pretend like I'm somebody else. So I don't want to be a different person when I work with someone from Korea or a team from Korea versus when I work with someone from Germany, right? And that's fair enough. And that all comes back to, again, self-awareness. So you need to have that self-awareness of what your core is. What are the values? What are you going by? And communicate them as well. As a leader, I think it's important to communicate your values and how you think and how you work. Now, it might not work for everyone, or it might not be the same as everyone else thinks, but those core values is something that you can bring into many different situations, and then how you communicate them, whether directly or indirectly, or how you communicate with your teams, how you make decisions with a team in Korea versus a team in Germany, that can differ. This does not necessarily touch your core values. So it's important to sort of realize and identify that. And I think what gives you that adaptability and flexibility in your style is that you expand that toolkit, right? Let's say communication toolkit. So if you've never worked with companies or offices in Southeast Asia, and you're from, let's say, UK, it is going to feel very different. The communication style feel more indirect, for example. So your toolkit then, and that skill of adaptability and flexibility here would be to really put an effort into decoding that other communication style, so that you understand what is actually being said and not misinterpret it. You won't always get it right. It's fine, but at least you're aware of the difference. And you also can be aware of any similarities that you have and build on an individual level with the team that you're working with as well. So it's really about combining all those skills, all the skill set and tools that you have as a leader that you've gathered over the years, or you're starting to gather if you're a new leader in the role, and flexing and bending it to fit into the context. Because ultimately, who should adapt their behavior? The person who wants to have an effective communication, right? So if you want to have an effective communication and reach a common goal, finish a project, etc., then it's on you a little bit, right, to make sure that this happens. And if you have that awareness that there may be some differences and that you prefer a very different working style from the culture that you're entering, let's say on a different project, then it's going to be much easier for you personally to deal with any challenges, but it will also be beneficial for the project because you will be able to adapt and practice different communication, for example, styles. Okay. So all these skills, in my opinion, are necessary for a global leader, and it's a bit more than what we usually talk about when we say about leadership skills. I think it's sort of like this extra layer. So to answer our question at the beginning, is global leadership or leadership across cultures just leadership, right? I would love for it to be. I would love for these skills to just be leadership, and how we define it and how we consider the basis of leadership. But I feel like it's not necessarily the case at this point. So if you're at this point where you already found your feet as a leader, as a new manager, perhaps, and you're starting to see how you can build the teams in your own current context, and if you either are already planning a global assignment or taking on an international team, or perhaps that's like a long-term goal of yours to develop in that direction, building on these skills here are going to give you that are going to distinguish you, right, from the other leaders, and give you that extra piece of knowledge and skill set that will set you up for success. So if you want to start developing your global leadership skills, there are a couple of things you can do. So this is just a few suggestions. And if any of this, if you have any more questions on any of that, or if you want to explore any of it further or discuss with me, just email or message me on Instagram, and we can just chat. You know I'm available for these kinds of conversations, so feel free to do that. The first thing that I would suggest is really increasing that self-awareness, right? It's the basis of everything. If you're not aware of something, you can't do anything about it. So there you go. Awareness is always the first step, and to do that awareness piece, you can take, for example, a cultural values assessment that I mentioned before, and it's a really great way to start the conversation and have the language to even have the conversation, right? What I offer specifically is for you to take the self-assessment by Cultural Intelligence Center. I can give you more details on that if you want. Just message me. That's easy step for you to take, and that assessment is followed by a one-on-one conversation with me, so that we can go through your individual report results and discuss how that translates into your life and any challenge that you're experiencing. So we do have a bit of coaching session around that using the tool, and then you gain, thanks to this, a language to talk about cross-cultural challenges and cross-cultural communication that you're experiencing, and also to develop your skills further. You can know where there's a gap to bridge within the context that you're currently working in. But also more I'd say immediate steps that you can take is to take that time to reflect. Okay, maybe straight after this session, after you watch it, for those who are not here live, you can reflect on those main drivers for you. So those main motivational factors on how developing cross-cultural competences can help you be more effective in your work. Because if you do work internationally with people from different offices around the world, then you are working internationally and across cultures, right? So you're crossing cultures every day, then when you send that email, when you make that call, or when you're on this Zoom video chat, right? So if you find this interesting, and if you would like to develop that but keep that motivation going, that's really a nice way to think about those drivers. Like, so what would that give me if I understood what my cultural influences are and how that impacts my relationships with others, and really name it, write it down. That could be your first step to developing that self-awareness as well. Around your motivators. And then finally, what you are going to receive from me after this session, if you have signed up via email, is a 12-week plan to develop your cultural intelligence. And really it's about taking small focused actions every day, every week. And then in a few weeks' time, you're going to see this accumulated result of feeling more confident and more comfortable in the cultures and the context that you're in. So what you're going to receive from me after this is a plan. It's a one exercise per week for the next 12 weeks for you to do. So it's really not a lot. And it's really interesting if you do have that curiosity and that drives all set up. It's really interesting to dig into these exercises and developing the self-awareness, developing the knowledge, being able to strategize and understand how and when to take action. So one exercise per week, and then in 12 weeks time you're already going to see and feel a difference of that accumulated work that you're going to put into it. But you got to put in the work. So that's the only condition. Thank you very much for today. I really hope that I'm going to hear from you soon. I'd love to discuss with you these topics and your personal situations and experiences as a global leader and working across cultures. And I hope we speak soon. You can reach me via email or Instagram DM. That's also very easy. And I hope we'll see each other very, very soon.